Hello, hello, hello to everybody. It's your boy Sean Flores. Called Flower Hour. This is the first in my new series, so I'm looking forward to having Kevin Munga on here, two-time author. He's going to be talking about his book, racism, and being an inspirational young black male. Now let me figure out how do I tell. Here we go. Perfect. There we go. Ready. Looking forward to this. It's been waiting for such a long time.
Yes, brother. Yes.
Yes, Kevin. What are you telling me?
I'm good, man. How are you?
Man, I'm good. It's been a long day. Did a little bit of training. Doing a lot more reading. I've got all my books in my library. Especially that's been happening, man. I'm so excited because we've waited for such a long time to be able to connect.
Yes, 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 yes. And to build,
Absolutely.
and it's the right time, I think, man. God's timing, perfect
Yeah,
timing.
no, for sure. I think, unfortunately, we're in a circumstance now with the unfortunate death of another brother,
Yeah,
George Floyd, and it's brought a lot of people together, which is obviously a positive thing. But I'm trying to keep this Instagram live series as something that's going to be consistent. People
yeah,
can continue to take away the knowledge, and I just want to use my platform for, most importantly, something positive to talk about
mhm,
inspirational people that I know, especially the black people that are in my life that I care about and I love
yeah.
about. So I just want to say thank you for coming on.
Listen, you're welcome, my brother, man. Thank you.
Yeah, man.
Opportunity
So
and the
before
platform.
you came into the request, I was introducing you as, two-time author now. You've written two books. What is the first one?
So the first one is Young Black Males Have Potential. That was
And
written in 2017.
and your second book?
And the second book is Who Am I? And it's about self-identity and purpose.
So yeah, man, you've got to tell the audience now about both your books because I remember I saw your Instagram when you had your first book out, and that's when we were speaking about, the idea of young black men. There's a negative stereotype, there's misconceptions, there's ideas that blackness works within a monolith and
Yeah.
there's only one set way to be, but resistance works from different lanes. So
Mhm.
I'd love to hear more about your first book.
Yeah, so Young Black Males Have Potential actually came about via an hashtag first, and it wasn't necessarily to actually be written, or it wasn't going to be pushed as it started off as a movement. So I started it off as
Yeah,
a hashtag, and I wanted to kind of play with the reverse psychology, all the negative stereotypes that we see in the media and how we are painted and demonized. So for me, it was really about tapping into that area, but flipping it on its head and showing that no, we do have potential. And then I started doing the studies around it, and I started to see, because I was speaking, I started to see that all top speakers had things that they've said documented. That's when I knew that I needed the book in order for my voice to be everywhere in the world. And
yeah,
so I started to look at literature, I started to look at books. Obviously, I was a beginner, so I wasn't sure on the reception I was going to get. But then, yeah, I just thought of it. I said, listen, this is the hashtag you've been using. This
yeah,
is the first book. And I felt like, okay, cool. This is going to be the book that I'm going to talk about. And then, yeah, the book wasn't easy to write, but in a
yeah,
way, it, it came it came together organically because I knew,
yeah.
excuse me, what I wanted to write about. I knew that I wanted to talk about gangsterism due to previous experiences. I knew that I wanted to talk about black on black crime, something that's
Yeah,
affecting every single day. You either know someone that's dead, or you know of someone that's dead, or your neighbor's dead, or the person down the road is dead. So I knew that black on black crime was something that I wanted to really, talk about and explain. I spoke about police brutality, and as we see, it's still happening in 2020. Do you know what I
yeah,
mean? Something very, very important. Stereotypes, black masculinity, all the um, different chapters are very important. Not There's not one chapter that's more important than the other one. They're all very much significant and on the same level, really. And yeah, so I released the book in 2017. Although I was studying for a law degree and I was in my second year, I still prioritized it and released it because urgency calls for priority. So yeah, that's the first book.
Listen, when I hear that, it makes me so happy because, you know, when I grew up, there were certain things that I didn't understand, and there were only certain things that I could conceptualize until I studied my undergraduate in criminology and sociology. And I really want to ask you the question about black on black crime. Now, typically, when we hear black on black crime, it's a rebuttal from when certain people outside of the black community and perhaps even some black conservatives use as a
Yeah.
narrative to push against the idea that there's police brutality or institutional racism. And I would love to hear more about black on black crime, especially for the listeners here, that when they hear black on black crime, they're going to be like, oh, I don't want to hear that. He's just probably going to try and use that as an excuse. I know it's not like that from talking to you, but I'd love to hear more specifically about black on black crime.
So black on black crime, as we know, obviously the cliche explanation would just be one black man inflicting harm on another. But it obviously much deeper than that. And again, like you said, someone might just be like, "Oh, this is an excuse," or this is a way of making us the victims. But it's actually not. Obviously, there's underlying issues such as poverty, such as social class, such as just being exposed to different things and different things to your from your estate to the education you receive, one receives, the attention one receives, and the accessibility of being able to look past that. And essentially what crime does, essentially what poverty does is it brings forth crime.
Absolutely.
Now, you're not going to rob someone that's got security and someone that's inaccessible. You're going to go and rob the person that you can access. And unfortunately, 9 times out of 10, that's your fellow black brother. So that's how black on black crime actually arises. That's how it comes. That's how it comes into fruition. You know what I mean? And so yeah, this is how black on black crime obviously started. And then from that, we see obviously now it's like something that's inherited to the younger generation. It's something that obviously something that's glorified and glamorized. If you're not above the average mind, you will just adhere to. So that's what happens, man. Just young people killing each other and getting their stripes, as they call it. So yeah, a very distorted view, but that's what I can say on black crime, man.
And following on from the very idea that, you know, black people or those that are involved, the very concept of black on black crime, you rob who's closest to you in your vicinity, and that's typically another brother. Now, I guess suppose we could both liken that to the very much of the idea of crabs in a barrel. You know, each crab is trying to make it out, but every crab is pushing the other crab down just to make it to the top, not realizing that if all the crabs work together and they use their brain, they could all climb out of the barrel together as a brotherhood, as a community. So as a community and as an individual yourself, how important is communitarianism to the upliftment, to the fulfillment and the enjoyment very much so of the black community?
Oh, sorry, bro. You're gonna have to say that again. The connection.
Which part did you hear me say?
You stopped the connection between, I think, black on black crime.
So I was saying that very much that when we think about black on black crime,
yes,
as you said, you know, you rob your brother that's typically within the vicinity, and it's like crabs in a barrel. You're trying to climb, each trying to climb out, but you're pushing on each other without realizing if you work as a community, you can take each other out of the barrel. So I would like to know from you, how could we find fulfillment, enjoyment as a community moving forward, and as an individual? How are you going to be able to help that? Because you have your book, but how are you also pushing that narrative outside of being an author?
So I think it's simple and it's not simple. The simplicity of it is representation. So you as a young black man who looks like them, talks like them, who may have a similar background to them, talking about the young men that are taking each other's lives or that are scoring points on the streets, you become a representation in something that they believe that they would never be able to in an area they feel like they can never excel in. You go into that area and you try to become a representation there. And I know a lot of people will say, oh, but how do you break that wall? what you do is you'll never know if you don't try. So what you do is obviously literature was for me the area which I felt like, okay, we're underrepresented in, underrepresented, underrepresented in,
Yeah.
and I felt like, okay, this is the avenue that I want to go into. In 2016, there was only one black author in the whole of the UK, one black author that had written a novel.
Say
And
that
for
again.
me,
Say that
there was
again, just so
only,
people can hear that again.
in 2016, only one black author had written a novel in the entire UK.
That's incredible.
Um,
That's crazy.
yeah, and it just comes to show that yeah, we're underrepresented in that industry. What you do is you also create an alternative. So a lot of young black men growing up on estates or in deprived areas would have felt like the only way out for them, if it wasn't street credibility, because we have to understand a lot of these young men are ambitious. That's why they get involved in gangs. They would have thought the only legitimate way to feel like somebody or to feel like someone of value would have been football or music. Do you know what I
So
mean?
achievements of the body and not the mind,
Yes.
which is
Achievements of the body.
which is typically a paradigm we are very much stuck in. And
Mm-hmm.
you know, during my childhood, my mum refused for me to actually have achievements of the body. It simply had to be of the mind. And I was
Mm,
talented at both, which
mm,
came at a cost because one had to be sacrificed. Although I think I could
mm,
have done both, but that's
mm,
actually a very, very good point.
yeah.
And following on from your point about gangsterism, I'd like to know if you're willing to share
Mhm.
with myself and with people watching, what's your story with gangsterism? Because I don't hear many people say gangsterism. I think typically we hear gangsters, you know,
Mhm.
thugs, and so on. So what's your experience?
So gangsterism is a state of mind um, that you inherit, that you adopt from seeing things from an early age, or so violent from an early age. Obviously, I'm not born in this country. I'm born in Paris. Came here
Okay.
at the, yeah. So I'm born in Paris, and from an early age, I was seeing gangsterism. I had two older brothers who made a name for themselves to an extent in Paris through fighting. So from an early age, I was told that one proves his masculinity by fighting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And obviously, that's the ideals that I adopted. If that's what you're seeing as a young man or as a young child, that's all you can go by, kind of thing. So that was the first introduction to gangsterism, just fighting, standing your ground, holding your own. And then I came to London, and what I saw in London was there was a lack of familiarity. So in France, although there was violence, there was a lot more familiarity. I could knock on my neighbor's door, ask for ketchup, ask for onions, and vice versa. When I came here, that's when I actually was introduced to what gangs are, kind of thing. So that's like um, a different introduction, or the second part to gangsterism, as I would call it. And what I also saw was that the gangsters were quite respected. They had some sort of immunity. They could go to the
Yeah.
news agent and come back without being touched, without being robbed. And the people that weren't involved, they'd be asked, what area are you from? They'd be robbed, they'd be bullied. And then what I started to realize was that if you can't, if you're not part of this, if you can't beat them, essentially you have to join them. As cliche as it
Yeah.
sounds. And so yeah, so for me, gangsterism was that. It was freedom, liberty, it was power. It was quite a lot of things when I was a young man growing up. It was the thing. Do you know what I mean? Growing up where I grew up, Croydon, and yeah, man, literally, gangsterism is just it's all of those things, and then you come to a realization at the end that they're actually all illusions. But when that's all you live in, and that's all you see, you believe that if you can't beat them, then surely you must join them.
So essentially,
Gangsters, yeah,
everything that you saw became your reality.
100%.
I remember from my studies and from my reading, there's a very famous test with mice, and this is surrounding drugs. But there were mice, and they were in a environment. However, they build the environments for the mice.
Yeah.
They put cocaine in the water for mice, and
Mhm.
the mice obviously became addicts. There
Yeah.
was nothing around their environment that was stimulating, nothing help them to come off their addiction, because people forget that mice and humans psychologically have very similar traits. Rats are
Mm,
incredibly social animals. They become super depressed if they don't have other animals to associate and to play with. And what it
mm,
also showed was they still carried on with crack. It was crack, it was over cocaine, either one of the two, but both the same.
mm,
One's diluted, one's pure. Um, there was crack, and I'll just use cocaine for this off the top of my head.
mm,
Cocaine was in one of the water, and one of the other waters was clear.
mm,
And in this environment, it had like a wheel, that a lot of mice run on, and
mm,
so on. It had a lot of other things. And eventually, what they realized with the mice was the mice stopped from drinking the water that had the cocaine
mhm,
simply because their surrounding environment was stimulating enough for them to not have to use drugs
mm,
as a stimulus. And
mhm,
one of my biggest arguments in my own community is, as you said, gangsterism, black on black crime. It's a way for us to stimulate ourselves in a very morbid, in a
mm.
very tragic, and in a very insidious way. And I just wonder, what could we put in that environment to allow us and to help us stimulate the growth and excellence of our young
Mm.
black brothers, especially?
Very good question. I'm going to think about it before I answer it. What I would say is, again, representation, but you take it to the next step. Now, representation now has to develop into opportunities to the same people that you see coming out of your areas, who are not just footballers or who are not just rappers, who may be authors or actors or politicians, just anything that is quite, that looks quite, that you need ambition to attain, you put in the face. You put that in their faces, and you show them that, okay, there are opportunities. I am accessible. Come here, do this. You set up events for them. You bring employers. You make it very informal as well, because a lot of the times when you make things formal, you sometimes barricade yourself, and you kind of put a stop to certain things, because the young people will be like, oh, I'm not good enough, or the way I speak, I'm not articulate, or I can't, attend that event. So you make it informal. Maybe you have a console there, you have food, and you just make yourself accessible. Do you know what I mean? We saw John Boyega going to the protest, and everyone
Yeah,
reposting pictures. And again, that's accessibility. You could have been like, I'm a top star. I can't be around all those people. You could have felt fearful and thought someone might try to rob me or this or that. I don't think he was with like security or bodyguards, but
yeah.
yeah, again, it kind of shows the humility that one needs when you're coming from those areas, and then you just kind of just give back, you give back, you give back, and you put in their faces, because the young people are not going to come towards you. You have to go towards them. You just have to throw the opportunities. So I think that's definitely one way to stimulate their minds. They're very ambitious people, and so we have to drive their ambition towards the right causes. Yeah.
Perfect. I'm just gonna say to all the viewers that if you have any questions you want to ask Kevin or myself, just put them in the comments, and we'll try and ask them as well.
Yeah.
But also from your work, Kevin, I've
Mhm.
seen you've gone to HMMP Wandsworth, right?
Yeah.
I've also worked in prisons, and you realize a lot of these men, they're not scary. When they have
Yep.
another black brother that comes in, that speaks the way we do, that speaks positive to them, they just want a chance, and they
Hmm.
just want an opportunity to be able to reintegrate themselves back into society.
Hmm.
And I want to ask, from your experience of prisons, what have you taken away from it? And if there's anything you could do differently for the boys in prison, irrespective if they're black or white, what would you do?
What would I do? Um, Obviously, when you find yourself in prison, must mean that something must have happened, and obviously you've ended up there. So the first thing to do is not reminding one of their past, reminding or reiterating to the person, because they might have heard it before, that perfection is non-existent. Because a lot of the times people will still blame them for what they've done. They'll come up to society that still kind of labels them as the ex-prisoner, and stuff like that. And so what you do is you try to eradicate those labels so that they come out with a fresh mind. What I would do, obviously, if I go in there, would be some sort of mentoring, some sort of helping them rehabilitate themselves for when they come out. Because I see a lot of things, I see a lot of people welcome ex-prisoners with champagne. But okay, that champagne hopefully will then turn into an opportunity for them to make money when they're out, because
Yeah.
it's good, throwing champagne on the person that's coming out. But if they're coming out to nothing, no
Yeah.
opportunity, no mentoring, no following, nothing, what's gonna happen? They're
Yeah.
gonna reoffend. You know what I mean? So I think for me, it's really like just making sure when they're there to prepare them for the world outside. Because when they come out, I work with young men. I mentor young men, and there was a young man. We had a referral of a young man that was coming out, so he was fresh home, right? A 16-year-old, and when I took him shopping, he was just like, "Oh, there's actually no one in the streets." So remember, they're not. They've stopped somewhere. You have to
Yeah.
update them. Do you know what I mean? He was like, "There's no
Yeah.
one in the street. This corona thing is real. There's actually no one." We went into Audi, and he wanted to buy the shop, literally. He was like, today I'm gonna eat everything. He picked up sweets, he picked up biscuits, he picked up everything, and that's what happened in that person's life. So what I would say is, you talk to them whilst they're there. You try to update them as much as you can, and then when they come out, you support them. You help them find work. You help their mind. You help rehabilitate them, and then yeah, we can move forward that way.
Yeah, that sounds great, and it's something that I absolutely agree with, and I hope that you and I will be able to do that because I think it's important. Before we move on to talking about your second book, we've
Yeah,
got a question from Hi Kati, if I pronounced it correctly, that says, "I
yeah.
question whether you're strengthening the association between gangsterism and blacks when it happens in every race." Kevin, I would lead you to answer that question.
Hold on, let me read the question. Didn't see the question. So by strengthening, does he mean in terms of fighting the cause or fighting for the actual gangsterism?
I think what I'm going to assume what whoever that individual is and what they're saying is,
Hmm.
are we strengthening the association between gangsterism and blacks? So are we making I suppose it's the word association between gangsterism and blacks. By us associating gangsterism and black, are we
Hmm.
only adding fuel to the fire?
So no. So gangsterism is a separate topic. It's a topic of class, social class. Um, Most predominantly, it happens within the working class. It happens again. It derives from poverty. It derives from a lack of opportunity. We don't associate it to blacks, but unfortunately, subconsciously, when we tend to, because it's been something that's been played in our music videos, it's something that's been quite worshipped in our neighborhoods, we tend to think, like for example, when one of our referrals were coming in, where I work, we obviously read the report and it said that he had stabbed an individual before and stuff like that. And then my colleague called me and he was like, "Oh, he's not black." And and for me, it was just like, wow, it's not something that's actually done. Um, it's done on purpose. It's actually just something within our community that's quite worshipped more than in other communities. We don't see it as much as if we might even um, get that misconception that people might feel like, oh, if because he's Asian, he won't be a gangster, or because he's white, he might be a pretender kind of thing. So it is something that's been strengthened within our community anyways. When I was writing the solution of gangsterism, it had nothing to do with the race. It just had to do with the social class. And unfortunately, because my topic was about black people, it just happened to fall within that kind of discussion anyway. So no, that's not an agenda that I reinforce, but it is an agenda that does exist.
Okay. For example, when I think of gangsterism, I think of the Cray twins, Mods and Rockers, who are actually white, and very much the idea of moral panics came from Mods and Rockers in the papers. But when I grew up in the time when there was SUK. Who was it? I can't remember some of the other groups or the gangs that I had when I grew up. So, for example, when we went to Battersea in South West London, we were approached by a few boys and they said, "What ends you from?" And because all of us on the bus, we knew that if we said we were from Tooting when Tooting was at war with Battersea, the man would have punched us up or stabbed us at least. And I might not even have been here to tell the tale. But good thing all of us were prepared. And we said we came from a road. It was just down the road within the area. And then they asked us another question. And it's a good thing we were able to answer it because we were talking, you know, about football. We were there to do athletics. I think, unfortunately, some other brothers may not have been able to tell the tale. And when we think about postcode wars have been something that have been happening for a while. They seem to have completely died down at the moment because of COVID. But I hope things like postcode wars and gangs can stop. But however, it seems that gangs, Kevin, have a place in our society simply because there is a weakening of the black family, which I think both you and I would agree absolutely needs strengthening because charity begins at home. And my last question to you before we speak about your second book is, how can we strengthen the family when these gangs also become family for a lot of these young boys who they don't have a father, or their mother doesn't understand their struggles, or they're trying to put food on the table for their family. They're doing it by illegitimate means, but it's got a good heart at the same time.
How do we strengthen the family? First and foremost, we look at the family dynamics. A lot of the times you'd have the absent father myth, or you may have a mother who isn't necessarily a role model. So you kind of look at the dynamics, and that's when you step in, because a lot of the times it's not actually your birth father who is your father. Someone else can become that person or that father figure, so to say, because obviously it can't actually replace your father, that father figure, so to say. So that's what happens, and we need to look at the young men, because a lot of young men, they want to speak to someone, and they won't necessarily do it the first time you speak to them, but with mentoring, with building a bond, building a rapport, they end up opening up, they end up becoming transparent, and they bring you in. And if they can see that, okay, how you're doing and your representation is really good and this and that, then from that they can withdraw, and you can be the father figure for that young person. But what it is, again, we need the numbers. We need more people to have similar mindsets to ours. Do you know what I mean, my brother? And Rome wasn't built in a day. But again, you have to be consistent. Consistency is the key. And yeah, so it's for us to support really these young men that are lost and they're not coming from the right families.
Rome wasn't built in a day, and the destruction of the black community didn't happen overnight, is always my saying. I'd love to talk to you about your second book. So if you could tell me more about your second book, because we've heard about your first book, we've explored a few chapters in it, but let's talk about that second book.
So yeah, the second book is Who Am I? Self-identity and purpose, and it discusses one's purpose on earth, why you are here. I believe that everyone has a heavenly mission as to why they're here. So I really wanted to home in on that and just explain, certain things that I've gone through and why I've encountered certain adversities, and if it's had an adverse effect on me or if it hasn't. So I really wanted to tap into a lot of topics. I did speak about the streets as well. I spoke about growing up, why I felt like I needed to, join the gang. And then I spoke about also how I wasn't able to see the consequences to my action at the time. Because as a 16-year-old, through my research, I realized that actually there's a part in the front of the brain that's called the frontal lobe, and that isn't fully developed until the age of 25.
Oh,
so
wow.
as a 16-year-old, you would have not. Sorry for that. Sorry about that. But as a 16-year-old, you wouldn't have necessarily seen the consequences to your actions, and you would have just acted out of fear or acted subsequent to having certain feelings. And so yeah, I spoke about all of that in the book. I spoke about my transitioning. I only took education seriously at the age of 21. and I'm still able to conduct myself in interviews. I'm still able to be articulate, just to show that it's never too late to these young black men as well that, you know, haven't necessarily been supported by our educational system. I never felt like I was supported. I was bottom set in every class. I left school with one GCSE. That was a French GCSE. It's only because I spoke the language. Do you know what I mean? So all of those things, when I came to that realization that I'm still able to write 2 books and go into an industry where you need a minimum of intellect or some sort of intellect, I'm able to, you know, graduate in law, yeah, able to go on TV and articulate myself and stuff. So I think for me, it was really, really, really important that I wrote the book, you know, just to explain that I found out who I was in the end, and you surely can.
I think purpose is such an intrinsic part of a human, and it's almost as if our whole identity revolves around it. And a lot of us do not seem to understand purpose and how it aligns with our identity, which in turn helps our sense of self. And when did you find out? At which point in your life did that epiphany come when you said to yourself, this is my purpose, this is my identity, and this is who I am going to be?
So from a lot of oppression that one receives, one will eventually fight back. But again, you fight back with the tools that you have, right? And then if you're within a world where your tools are violence, or let's say knives or guns, that's what you're going to use, right? I got to a point in my life where I was 19 years of age, tired of everything that was happening in the area and people dying. And I said to myself, surely there must be a better way to fight back where none of us will die. And yeah, even before getting to education and seeing that education would be the area in which I would get my freedom from, I was then invited to church. And for me, church was my attachment. Everyone has an attachment when they come from a certain walk of life. And the walk of life is negative. And the walk of life was negative previously. So for me, the walk of life was negative previously. I had church as an attachment. From church, I was given structure. I was given the 10 Commandments. I was given positivity as well. That's something that we don't speak about a lot. Speaking life into someone is very significant. It's very important, and it should not be underestimated. And from obviously all of that, I was then asking myself, okay, I've received all of this positivity and I've heard of the stories and I've been able to transition and to stop selling drugs or to stop being on the streets or to stop hanging out with the wrong people. I'm surrounded by good people, and this is now the new ambition, and I'm part of a new family. Who am I? That's when you start asking yourself, all right, they're doing something with their life. They're driving decent cars, or they're doing certain things. They're working jobs. They're earning money. They seem happy as well, because that's the highest form of success. How do I become happy like them? And that's when the epiphany comes in. And literally, for me, I was just asking myself all the time, God, why are you waking me up? I was pressuring God. Why are you waking me up? Why are you waking me up? Why are you waking me up? And organically came the passion to fight for causes, you know, to change, to change, for social change to come forth, for social change to occur. And then, yeah, literally a book derived from it. After the book, opportunities derived from the book that then obviously manifested in a second book being written and other things that I'm working on right now. So yeah.
And I want to ask you, so the church became your agent, I suppose, for the change that you've therefore manifested into your life. It's become a part of your identity. I grew up Seventh-day Adventist, which is technically a denomination away from Christianity. It was created by Ellen G. White, who they believed that she had visions when they found out scientifically later on that she had epileptic fits. Now, I'm not here to dispute whether she had visions or not, but she was also quite racist. And Adventism is quite new, but ironically, Adventists are some of the longest living Christians in the world. They live
Mm-hmm.
in a blue zone, for example, in California, where they have great access to fruit, veg. A lot of them live raw vegan, veganism is for a whole nother topic on a whole nother day. But I want to
Mm-hmm.
ask you, religion has been such a core component of revolutions for Black people typically. So we've got Malcolm X, Nation of Islam, moved away from it. He was still Muslim. We have Martin Luther King, who was Christian as
Mm-hmm.
well. We've got Marcus Garvey, where Pan-Africanism is technically a religion in the way we can understand it, which is a branch off from Rastafarianism. We can go around that all day, but that's for another live. I want to ask you, can the church today be really and truly a revolutionary component for Black people when what I find and what I found typically is a lot of people are more angry, Christians, that, oh, and as my friend Deji said, Nat Turner turned the Bible on its head. Good shout, Deji. I want to ask, so the church sometimes ends up creating more division, and a lot of people have been angrier at the looting as opposed to the death of George Floyd. And I want to ask you, your own personal opinion, can the church be a revolutionary agent for change? And what is your feelings around the looting and the death of George Floyd?
The church can most certainly be part of our change and our progress. Just because when you even look at some of the deaths, you will look at some of the biblical names, the Daniels that die, the Davids that die. So when I hear a church saying that it's a separate problem, for me, that's absolute madness. Like the church is what buries us. At a funeral, who do we call? You know what I mean? We call a religious leader. So yeah, the church can definitely be used as a revolutionary tool, and it has been for some parts of the world. In the UK, actually, it's been happening with certain pastors. But what happens is sometimes we have a problem of Christians that are legalistic and that don't see that God is actually a God of love, and anything that is positive, He's behind.
Say that again for people to hear, because I understand what you mean, but you got to break down that term. What is it? Legalistic.
So legalistic, people that are quite radical, and people that
Okay.
see things in one way, people that are quite judgmental, people that see that, okay, you're coming in the church maybe with, I don't know, it can be tattoos on your face, or it can be just something that maybe one shouldn't do, or it could be something that's against a principle of God, like fornication or something. And what the church tends to do at times, not all churches, is they might push that person away because they don't feel like that person is worthy enough to be, seen with or to be connecting with them. And we don't see enough love. But of course, the church can definitely be a revolutionary tool to bring forth change, 100%. Religious leaders have a lot of impact, a lot of influence. As we said, Martin Luther King was a religious leader as well. He was a minister, but he was able to sit in front of the President of the United States. Malcolm X was a religious leader as well. So yeah, and it doesn't have to be just Christianity. It can be Muslims as well. So even the mosques can be used as a revolutionary tool, 100%.
I absolutely agree with you. And when we think about Martin Luther King, he was deeply whitewashed in history. People forget that Martin Luther King wasn't completely non-violent. He believed in defense and to love his own people. But it was, however, until I believe it was the protests he went to at Montgomery, where they said to him he had to be peaceful, otherwise they were going to end up using violence on him. And I need to double check and read over some of the books that I have, but that's what I remember off the top of my head. It may be right, it may be wrong. And I want to find out from you as well. I've been to events where there's the Nation of Islam, and I find my issues around them, they're not really doing too much the way they should, because unless you're Muslim, they don't really align with your thought process. And for someone like me, I don't necessarily buy into the concept of heaven or hell, because my idea of life is I can make my life my heaven or hell. and I don't want to submit to a religion that forces me to wait for a life hereafter because I can have a life here now. But I'm not going to knock other religions as a result of that. Everyone has their belief structure. But how do we reach people who, as soon as they hear religion, they close off their brains, they close off their minds, and they close off their hearts? How would you reach those people who are unwilling to hear the message alone?
What you do, you see what you do with those people, those type of peoples is you don't Bible bash, or you don't use the Quran excessively. Again, that's a subjective view of mine. You don't use the Quran excessively whilst you're trying to aid them. And I tend to see, what we tend to see is a lot of people Bible bash and forgetting that how they walk is Jesus, how they speak is Jesus. As the Bible says that you know them by their fruits. So if your fruits are patience, humility, you know what I mean, goodness of the heart, then that person will be drawn towards wanting to get involved with you anyways, without you having to preach. But again, that's quite a modern way to look at it. We still have people that are acting in their old ways, and it's quite, as I said, again, legalistic, radical one way, and that's how you can be drawn towards me. But you always have to create that bridge. You have to create that bridge because, again, like you said, you've got a way of thinking. My brother also has his way of thinking because he's an intellectual. So a lot of the things for him in the Bible don't necessarily make sense. You know, you might maybe think, okay, there's a contradiction here. There might be this, there might be that. And what I tend to do is when we do speak is I try to create a bridge just for us to have a conversation. Do you know what I mean? And I try to not be radical so that he doesn't flee. Because a lot of the times when you do that, it's a form of hate. Being radical in a certain way and saying to someone it's this way or no other. So yeah, that's how you create that's how someone's drawn towards you. You create the bridge.
Absolutely. I think bridging the communities together, especially for the Black community, is so important. And Bible bashing really could just drive people away. You know, people from my church still want me to come back to church, and I've informed them I'm not going to come back for a while. I'm still on my own journey. Whether or not I return to Christianity is yet to be seen. But for now, there is no sequel to the prequel. I want to ask you, so we've spoken a lot about your 2 books. We've spoken about your work in prisons. I wanted to get onto a little bit more of a heavy topic, and that is George Floyd. Upon seeing what happened to the brother, which I absolutely agree is a modern day lynching, police brutality has absolutely continued, and it's not seeming to stop. As a young Black man, how do you feel seeing the death of another Black brother in George Floyd? And are our fears of America warranted here in the UK?
Very good question. What I will say to that question is that I feel like the George Floyd episode is nothing new in terms of I'm not desensitized to it. It's always going to be hurtful to me. Always. Anyone losing their life in such a way will be something hurtful to me. But we need to understand that this is something that's been happening when we look at. I take one example from the UK, who is because we have a misconception that in the UK, because they don't have guns, there's no racism or the police is okay here. And a lot of people don't know that the information is out there, but a lot of people don't study the information of police brutality here. So we've got Nuno Cardoso, who was a first-year law student, who died in custody. Rashawn Charles here as well, again, died because of police brutality. And obviously the George Floyd it sparked something because of how it was filmed. You know what I mean? And the seeing of the 9 minutes and the standing on him and stuff like that, that's why it was, taken so seriously. A lot of the times we don't get to see that, and we don't get to see the police officer, standing on his neck. It might be that he gets shot, or we might just see the headline on the news, and I think that's why everyone took it seriously. But from 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 before we were hearing what was happening, I think it should have been taken seriously. The protest should have been going on. It took Martin Luther King 381 days to get some change. The Montgomery Walk was 381 days, which is more than a year.
Yeah.
And people really need to understand that it is consistency. The Blacked Out Tuesday, I didn't get involved with it. I posted the day after and being extra, but literally it was just like for me. So well, I'm not going to do this for a day. Forget it. We're not going to get things within a day. Yeah, I just felt really heartbroken because I could see people posting, and I didn't want it to be kind of like a bandwagon moment where everyone posts because it's just happening now, and then in a week's time we just carry on living our normal lives. I want it to be. I'm really for the cause, and consistency is key. And again, as I said, how do you help young black people? You help within your community. You read your history. You know thyself. You protest. There's so many things. If you can't protest, you can educate. If you can't educate, you can read and inform yourself so you know how to defend yourself when you see police officers without having to be violent because you're educated on your rights, for example. There's so many things that one can do. And I mean, yeah, it has to be consistent, man. It can't just be one Tuesday, no way. It's like when we have 1 month for the whole year. I don't dig that. So yeah, that's how I feel about it, man. I feel it's heavy, you know, standing on his neck for 9 minutes. Yeah, it wasn't nice to see.
I think, taken from what you said, essentially, this can't just be a trend. It can't just be a hashtag. It can't just be a name. It has to be something that's been continuing. Brothers like you and I have been working every day of the year to continue putting a fight to blackness. You know, I did my TEDx talk on the failures of multiculturalism and how we need to have a black curriculum. And I'm going to be having my Instagram live with a young lady who actually has a black curriculum that she's creating, and so on and so on. And I think this is one of my biggest issues. You know, as I said, people like me and you, we do this all the time. And it's so important that we don't just get stuck in clicktivism, that we don't get stuck in the media cycle of a brother dies or a sister dies or someone black dies. And then there's a cycle where everyone does their action, then it stops again, then there's another death, and then it happens and it happens. And I sometimes think when it comes to the protests, the police and people are just banking for it to tire out. As you said, Martin Luther King protested for 381 days, more than a year. You also have in the civil rights era, where houses were being burnt down, places were being looted, police were killing black people with hoses and setting dogs on them, beating them. We have a time now where we can make these changes last for a lot longer than what they currently are, and we need to be able to do that. And I think when we think about everything that's happening, as long as we create a sustainable change and continue to educate people, I would like to believe some of the issues we have will eventually subside or go away, but maybe I'm living in a fantasy. But I'd like for you to tell me what is happening for you in the future moving forward. From your you've got the 2 books, you know, you're still doing your work in the prisons. Where can everyone find you on social media as well?
Yeah, so in terms of the work that I'm gonna undertake after this, you know, this pandemic, which is stopping quite a few things, is the fact that I'm going into schools to deliver talks now, testimonial again, representation and accessibility. I don't wanna be too far gone now that I've got the books, now that I've been on TV or now that I've been in the newspaper, and that's the problem that we have. A lot of the people that do make it or excel, they become inaccessible. You don't see them kind of thing. So I want to be accessible to the young kids. So that's something that is going to be happening in September, I'm guessing. I've been solicited for that, for a speech soon within a school, and that's going to happen within more schools. So it's going to be a program called Inspiration with Munga, where I turn up with 53 books of young black males of potential. Those books will be signed, and those young people will be able to speak to me. And it's happened already, but it's just a continuation of it. Another thing is that I'm gonna go into visuals. We need to tap into every area to get our messages across. So short films is an area that I'm looking into now. I've already written my first script. So from writing books, we're writing scripts now, and it's going to be on bullying. Bullying is a big thing within our community. Not just our community, in other communities. So a lot of people will be able to relate. And in terms of social media, Facebook is Kevin Munga. No Twitter. I just don't really get Twitter. So
Yeah, neither do I. I don't know how to work it.
Twitter is just a mad one. LinkedIn, Kevin Munga. Instagram, Kevin Munga _. Yeah, that's how you can keep up with the work. And we can collaborate. Again, none of the bouginess, none of the I'm inaccessible. I am accessible, and people, can come approach me, and we can work, man. We can work.
I want to ask you another question. Are you ever worried of when you go into schools that the Black experience is being fetishized? And when I say that, it's very much the idea you're not worthy of hearing unless you've had a struggle that relates to gangs, prisons, or some kind of crime. Am I the only one that has that idea sometimes that you have to have that story for kids to sometimes listen? And is that not suggestive of the very much the trauma cycle which sometimes people who even have the best intentions for us and for our youth keep us locked in?
No, I wouldn't necessarily say that, because a lot of the times, again, like you said, so if you don't have that story, like a young man said to me, a young man that I'm working with now who's come out of prison said to me the same thing. I'll only listen if it's a real G, if it's a real gangster. And it kind of seems as if, they're not able to listen to anyone else. I mean, it's just for the person themselves who aren't necessarily a real G or never is from a different walk of life to kind of just understand the language. And again, everything is education. The streets can actually be taught. Like I say this all the time. And there are books out there. There's a book from a friend of mine called Prisoner to the Streets, where he actually dissects the streets. So that is actually a form of education as well, because within the streets there's hierarchy. Within the streets there's codes. There's a code of conduct. There's how one moves, how one does certain things. There's a language. So I'd say it's probably for that person to just, find an interest, and tap into that and be able to communicate with those people, because obviously this is all they've learned, or not all they've learned. They might have learned in schools, but that's all they've appreciated, in a way, or that's what they've put on a pinnacle, that this is what I'm gonna home into. This is the education that I'm getting. It's the streets. It's they get business acumen from it when it's they're selling the drugs. They get their language from the streets. So if it means being not articulate at all, but being able to communicate with other brothers and stuff and create bridges that way, and money, then they will do so. So I think it's definitely for that person to just understand the language. When you look at someone like George the Poet, for example, I don't think he's necessarily been in a gang, but he understands both worlds. And it's amazing what he does. He's very articulate, but he's then able also to speak to the man them. Do you know what I mean? So, I think that's what it is. Because, again, like you said, we don't want to push the agenda that if you ain't been from that life, you can't speak to those young men kind of thing. Hopefully that answers the question.
No, that definitely does. When I've gone into schools, and one of my friends who's actually watching this now, Deji, Brandon and I, we used to go into schools and we used to teach on projects around race, media, and education. And when Deji used to get so excited because he used to love talking about the war on drugs. You cannot get Deji not talking about the war on drugs because he wanted to educate the kids. And Brandon used to talk about education, and I used to switch in between music. And when kids hear music that they can relate to and they sometimes understand, that's what captures their mind. You walk into their environment, you pull them out at the same time, and you show them that there's two ways that they're able to live. And as you said, the idea of being relatable. Sometimes people think I sound quite middle class, and you sound white, you sound educated, Sean, like you've grown up in a middle class area. I grew up in the streets just as everyone has. It's just my mum forced me to read. That's all shit. That's all it was. I grew up in a single parent household, and I was able to relate to kids and somehow. And just as you are, you know, you came from Paris, you saw the streets, you know, you saw the gangsterism, you found your way through God. You're a two-time author. You work in prisons. I don't think people understand how remarkable a young man that you are to be able to do all of that with all the obstacles put against you, all the markers in life that have said to you, you shouldn't have been able to make it. But you and I are able to have a conversation over Instagram Live, and you and I have never even met. Could you imagine? We've never even met, but we're able to have this conversation because we have one common goal, and that is the liberation, and that is the freedom, the empowerment, and the fulfillment of our community. And for the last 2 to 3 minutes, I just want you to leave my audience here and your audience with some final words that they can take away.
So in terms of, I'll start off with some of the quotes that I live by. So the quote from the first book will be, I'm trying to challenge the ideology that in order to be somebody where I'm from, you need road status, and that the only way young black males make it where I'm from is if they know how to kick a ball or write lyrics. And literally it's talking about just creating the alternatives and showing that we are more than just footballers, we are more than just athletes. And essentially that intellectual weaponry is a necessity. And that's when they start taking us seriously, kind of thing. So that'll be the first thing. So for everyone to tap into different areas in which we can help our people, to show them that.
There's nothing more scary to society than an educated black man.
Amen.
And I say it and I stand by that.
Yes. And obviously it's because of, we've seen the success that we've gained from it. Not necessarily the success, but we've seen the positive impact it's had on us to read and to articulate ourselves. And we're able to articulate ourselves better and able to, you know, hold conversations such as these. But not everyone sees it that way. So that's why it is for us to make sure that we make it pleasable for other people to join us, to have these conversations. So that'll probably be the first thing. The second thing is, yeah, man, just keep doing you. I think a lot of the things that we tend to see as people love to say, I'm underrated, I'm not seen enough, I'm not visible enough. If you say that about yourself, who else will believe in you?
Yeah.
And I think that's what people need to stop doing. Why do you feel like you're underrated? Just because you're not seen by the people that don't need to see you anyways. Do you know what I mean? And it might be like there's a black businessman in Croydon who said that he was trying to get attention from the wrong people. And when he saw two kids walking across and they're walking past his shop, they tapped on the window. As he come out, they ran to him and hugged him. And he said, then you realize that this is the recognition I need to get. I don't need to be famous in the open world and get the attention from the wrong people. So that's what I would say. Do not feel like you're an underrated person. Just keep doing you. And yeah, that's really what I would say, man. Just keep pushing. I've got one passage of the book that I did want to read.
Go ahead. You've got 1 minute and 15 seconds. Go ahead.
Okay. I had the page. Page is gone. But yeah, I'm gonna find it. Okay, so this is in chapter 4, and it's called Culture, the chapter. And I literally talk about police officers. Obviously, it's irrelevant to the topic. Police officers employed to patrol urban areas they are unable to relate to causes miscommunication within communities. This statement highlights the importance of culture. What is culture? Where does your culture stem from? Culture is defined as ideas, customs, and social behavior from a particular group of people or society. Please do not make culture, in fact, please, people do not make culture. In fact, it is the reverse. Armed with this intellect, why do individuals choose to align themselves with such negativity? For
10
enhancement.
seconds. We've got 10 seconds. We've got 7, It's going quick.
Okay. No, I won't have time. I won't have
You know
time
what
to
it
finish
is? We're gonna
the
do a
point.
part 2. But yeah, oh, perfect. He's put a request in again. Good. Perfect. To end it so abruptly. Let's see if the connection. Yeah, Kev, man. Listen, I
Time was,
didn't want to end it so abruptly.
yes, the time was done up. Yeah, so again, the devil's a liar. It must be a powerful passage then, because I'm not able to even get the words out. But where is it? 1 second. Yeah, so the extract was police officers employed to patrol urban areas they are unable to relate to causes miscommunication within communities. This statement highlights the importance of culture. What is culture? Where does your culture stem from? Culture is defined as ideas, customs, and social behavior from a particular group of people or society. People do not make culture. In fact, it is the reverse. Armed with this intellect, why do individuals choose to align themselves with such negativity? For enhancement, respect, survival, fitting in, or having accessibility to facilities which are not necessarily obtainable in third world countries where morals and civilization prevails. My confusion ends when I see the lack of diversity in its urban areas. Revisiting memories and calling previous encounters, and possibly similar to some of yours. Croydon, Surrey, during 2003, in the last year of primary school, saw the emerge of many teenage social groups. However, the most popular groups accommodated the worst troublemakers. They all spoke the same and shared the same sense of style, but most importantly, they all appeared respected. Some of the perks that came with the come up and the notoriety included females, identity, and security, as they abided by their own set of rules. It was not until several years later I realized that those dividends were nothing but mere illusions. So that's the passage that I wanted to just highlight when we talk of the streets and we talk of how much of an impact it has on a young black male, how much it is viewed as something that is quite beneficial to one. You know, when you're talking about the things that one acquires from the street, such as respect, it's a way of survival, fitting in, having accessibility to facilities which are not necessarily obtainable in third world countries. Just really to show the extent of self-value that it adds to one. You then understand why it is something that is quite hard to fight against unless there are opportunities that seem a lot better to the eye for the young person that's involved.
Kevin, we've gone over by like
Yeah.
5 minutes. But let me tell you something. As I said, we've never met in person, but after COVID, we're going to meet. I definitely believe the audience have absolutely enjoyed having you as a guest on my new Insta Live series, Flower Hour. I'm going to hopefully be doing 2 guests every week. And we're going to have a part 2 with you in hopefully a good couple of weeks or maybe a month or so, because I want to catch up with your journey. So I just wanted to say thank you so much for being literally my first guest.
Thank you. Thank
you.
You
Honestly made it such a pleasure. And I'm so thankful that we've been able to share the information, the knowledge that we have, and you've been able to tell us about your life, man. And to be an author is something that I'm looking to be at some point in my life, Kevin. And you inspire me. And I'm sure that the people that are on my page are going to be inspired by you. And you're
Thank
a great representation to us young black men and to men to be better men out there in the world. And I truly mean that. I don't just say things for the sake of it. I want to say thank you so much. And your journey has inspired me more than you can honestly imagine. To keep going, to keep glowing, and don't ever give up. And if you ever need me, you know where I am. I'm a mobile phone away. I'm an Insta. I'm right here. So I'm definitely just want to say thank you so much.
I'm humbled, man. Thank you. Thank you to everyone that tuned in as well, man. This is something great. And that's how change occurs. You know, that's how change occurs, man. So unity, and through unity and love. So thank you to everyone that tuned in. Literally, man. Humbled.
And we're going to have a part 2. We promised to everyone we're going to have a part 2 because sometimes an hour is not enough. And in my story, I'm going to put up a direct link to both of your books if anybody wants to purchase Kevin's books.
The second one.
You want to support a black creators, black authors, but everything black at this current period in time, but also just in general, we want to help encourage that. And to anyone who's tuned in now, you've just missed the live, but I've put it on my page already, so you can tune in with that. So Kev, I'm gonna have to go now.
Yes.
Because you know, man, I'm so thankful though, Kev, man. We'll catch up.
Again, we'll catch up, brother, man. See you soon.
Definitely, man. I'll see you soon.
See you soon, brother.
All right.